I've been driving a taxi in New York City for 15 years now. 15 long years of navigating the concrete jungle, ferrying souls from one corner of hell to another. You'd think I'd have seen it all by now, but this goddamn city always has another trick up its sleeve. My name's Julius Caster, and I'm about to tell you why I can't sleep at night anymore. Why every fare makes my palms sweat and my heart race. Why I flinch at every shadow that moves across my rearview mirror. It all started on a muggy August night back in 2008. I was fresh on the job, still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking I was gonna make it big in the Big Apple. The city lights sparkled like stars, and the constant hum of traffic was music to my ears. I was parked outside a rundown apartment complex in the Bronx, waiting for my next fare. That's when she stumbled out of the shadows. She couldn't have been more than 20, rail-thin with matted black hair that hung in greasy strands around her gaunt face. Her eyes were sunken, ringed with dark circles that made her look like death warmed over. But it was her smile that got me. Wide and manic, stretching from ear to ear in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hey, mister," she slurred, tapping on my window. "Can you take me home?" Every instinct told me to floor it, to get the hell out of there. But I was new, eager to please, and frankly, I needed the money. So, I unlocked the door and let her slide into the backseat. "Where to, miss?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She giggled, a high-pitched sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, you know. Home." I turned to look at her, my patience wearing thin. "I need an address, lady." Her smile widened, if that was even possible. "Just drive, Julius. I'll tell you when we're there." My blood ran cold. I never told her my name. Before I could ask how she knew, she started humming. It was a haunting melody, one that seemed to burrow into my brain and nest there. I found myself driving, though I couldn't remember putting the car in gear. We drove for what felt like hours, winding through streets I'd never seen before. The buildings grew older, more decrepit. The streetlights flickered and died, plunging us into an inky darkness broken only by my headlights. All the while, she hummed. When I finally came to my senses, we were parked in front of an ancient, crumbling brownstone. The windows were boarded up, and the front door hung off its hinges. "We're here," she whispered, her voice suddenly right next to my ear. I yelped, jerking away. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, the backseat was empty. That should have been the end of it. A creepy fare, sure, but nothing I couldn't shake off. Except I couldn't stop humming that damn tune. Days passed, then weeks. The melody haunted me, playing on an endless loop in my head. I'd catch myself humming it while stuck in traffic, whistling it while I showered. It was there when I went to sleep and when I woke up. And then the nightmares started. I'd dream of that decrepit brownstone, of walking up those creaking steps and pushing open that broken door. Inside was always dark, always cold. And always, I'd hear her giggling, leading me deeper into the house. I never saw what was waiting for me in those depths. I'd always wake up screaming just before the big reveal. After a month of this, I was a wreck. Dark circles under my eyes, jumpier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. But I kept driving. What else could I do? That's when I picked up the old man. It was a crisp October evening, leaves skittering across the pavement like little lost souls. The old-timer was standing on a corner in Hell's Kitchen, one gnarled hand raised to hail me. He was ancient, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, his milky eyes unfocused. But there was something about him, a vitality that seemed at odds with his frail appearance. "Evening, son," he said as he eased into the backseat. His voice was like gravel in a blender. "Take me to Greenwood Cemetery, if you would." I nodded, pulling away from the curb. "Bit late for a visit, isn't it?" I said, trying for some light conversation. He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Oh, I'm not visiting, son. I'm going home." I froze, my hands tightening on the wheel. "Not again. You seem troubled, Julius," the old man said. I didn't bother asking how he knew my name this time. "Seen something you can't explain?" I stayed silent, focusing on the road ahead. "It's the girl, isn't it?" he continued. "The one with the smile and the song." I slammed on the brakes, the taxi screeching to a halt in the middle of the street. Horns blared around us, but I didn't care. "Who are you?" I demanded, spinning in my seat to face him. How do you know about her? The old man's face softened, a look of pity crossing his weathered features. Oh, my boy, you're not the first she's marked, and you won't be the last. Marked? What are you talking about? He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his many years. She's been haunting this city for longer than I've been alive. Takes a ride, plants her song, and waits. Waits for what? For you to go back to that house, he said, his milky eyes somehow managing to bore into mine. She feeds on curiosity, you see. On the need to know. And once you step inside. He trailed off, shaking his head. What happens if I go inside? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The old man smiled, and for a moment, I saw an echo of that girl's manic grin. Why don't you find out? When I blinked, he was gone. Just gone. As if he'd never been there at all. I sat there for a long time, ignoring the angry honks and shouts from other drivers. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what had happened, what was happening to me. Part of me wanted to forget it all, to push it down and pretend it never happened. But that damn song was still there, still humming away in the back of my mind. And now, added to it, was the old man's challenge. Why don't you find out? I knew I shouldn't, knew it was probably a trap, or worse. But the need to know, to understand what was happening to me, was overwhelming. Before I knew what I was doing, I was driving. The streets blurred past, familiar landmarks giving way to unknown territory. Somehow, some part of me remembered the way. And then I was there, staring up at that dilapidated brownstone. It looked even worse than I remembered, a dark wound in the fabric of the city. I sat in my taxi for what felt like hours, my hands clenched on the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. The song in my head had grown louder, more insistent. Finally, I opened the door and stepped out. The street was silent, empty. Not even the usual background noise of the city reached this forgotten corner. As I approached the house, the porch steps creaked under my weight. The broken door swung open at my touch, revealing a yawning darkness beyond. I stood on the threshold, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get back in my taxi and drive until I ran out of road. But the song called to me. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that I had to know. Had to see. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. And somewhere in the depths of the house, I heard her giggle. Welcome home, Julius, she said. I've been waiting for you. The darkness inside the house was absolute, a living thing that seemed to press against my skin. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any source of light, but my pockets were empty. Had I left it in the taxi? Or had it simply ceased to exist in this place? Julius, her voice whispered, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Come find me. I stumbled forward, hands outstretched, feeling my way through what I assumed was a hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and I could have sworn I felt them shift, as if the house itself was alive and moving. As I ventured deeper, memories began to surface. Not my own, but vivid flashes of lives I'd never lived. I saw a young woman in a flapper dress, giggling as she climbed into a Model T taxi. A businessman in a 1950s suit, checking his watch impatiently as he hailed a cab. A punk rocker with a mohawk, stumbling drunkenly into the backseat of a yellow checker Marathon. All of them ended up here, in this house. All of them lured by that damned song. I don't know how long I wandered through that impossible space. Time seemed to have no meaning here. But eventually, I found myself in what must have been the living room. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the boarded-up windows, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. And there she was, sitting in an ancient rocking chair, still humming that haunting melody. You came, she said, her voice filled with childlike wonder. They always come, but I'm always surprised. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there. But my body wouldn't obey. All I could do was stare at her terrible, beautiful face. Why? I managed to croak out. Why me? Why any of us? She tilted her head, considering the question. Why does anyone do anything? I'm hungry, Julius. And you. All of you. You feed me so well. As she spoke, her form began to shift. Her skin rippled and flowed like wax, her features melting and reforming. One moment she was the young woman I'd first picked up, the next an old crone, then a child, then something else. Something that hurt to look at. "What are you?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She laughed, and the sound echoed through the house, through time itself. "I'm the fare you pick up on a rainy night. I'm the shadow in your rearview mirror. I'm the song you can't get out of your head." She stood, moving towards me with an unnatural grace. "But most of all, Julius, I'm hungry." As she reached for me, I found my paralysis broken. I turned and ran, crashing through the twisting hallways of the house. Doors appeared and disappeared, stairs led to nowhere, and all the while, I could hear her laughing, getting closer. I don't know how, but I found myself back at the front door. It was open now, showing the street beyond. My taxi was still there, a beacon of normality in this nightmare. I burst out of the house, gulping in the night air like a drowning man. I threw myself into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. As the engine roared to life, I looked back at the house. She stood in the doorway, her form still shifting, still changing. But her smile, that terrible, wide smile, remained constant. "See you soon, Julius," she called as I peeled away from the curb. I drove for hours, putting as much distance between myself and that house as I could. When the sun finally rose, I found myself in a part of the city I didn't recognize. My phone was in my pocket, as if it had never been gone. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I quit my job, moved out of the city, left it all behind. But New York has its hooks in me, just like that thing in the house does. So I keep driving, night after night, fare after fare. And I wait for the next passenger who hums that song. Wait for the next address that doesn't exist. Wait for the next time I'll have to face what lives in that house. Because I know now, it's not a question of if, but when. This city has a hungry heart, and sooner or later, we all feed it. In the years since that night, I've had my share of strange fares. Each one leaves its mark, another scar on my psyche, another reason to look over my shoulder. There was the businessman who got in my cab near Wall Street, his expensive suit immaculate except for the dark stains on his cuffs. He spent the entire ride muttering about numbers and sacrifices, his eyes never blinking. When we reached his destination, a nondescript office building, he turned to me with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Want to know the secret to success, driver?" he asked, his voice a dry whisper. Before I could respond, he leaned in close. "It's simple. You just have to be willing to cut out the competition." Literally. He left a generous tip, along with a business card that turned to ash when I tried to read it later. Then there was the old woman I picked up outside a cemetery in Queens. She climbed into the backseat with a grace that belied her apparent age, a small wooden box clutched to her chest. "Take me to the river, dear," she said, her voice cracked and dry like autumn leaves. As we drove, she began to sing. Not the song that still haunted my dreams, but something older, a lullaby in a language I didn't recognize. The temperature in the cab dropped, my breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. When we reached the East River, she asked me to help her to the water's edge. Against my better judgment, I agreed. As we stood on the bank, she opened the box. Inside was a small, mummified hand. "My son," she explained, her eyes filled with an ancient sorrow. "He's been waiting a long time to come home." She tossed the box into the river, and for a moment, I swear I saw a child's face in the water, smiling up at us before it disappeared beneath the waves. But perhaps the most unsettling fare came on a foggy night in the meatpacking district. A man flagged me down, his features obscured by the mist and a wide-brimmed hat. As he settled into the backseat, I caught a whiff of something metallic and sickly sweet. "Where to?" I asked, trying to get a better look at him in the rearview mirror. But no matter how I adjusted it, his face remained in shadow. "Just drive," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'll tell you when to stop." We drove in silence for what felt like hours, the city outside becoming unfamiliar, twisted. Streets I'd known my whole life suddenly led to places that couldn't possibly exist in New York. Finally, he told me to stop. We were parked in front of a massive warehouse, its windows dark and broken. "What is this place?" I asked, a sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. The man chuckled, a sound like bones grinding together. It's where I work, driver. Where I process things. As he spoke, the fog seemed to clear for a moment. Through the warehouse windows, I saw movement. Huge, inhuman shapes shifting in the darkness, accompanied by the sound of machinery and something else. Something that might have been screaming. "Want to see inside?" the man asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm always looking for new employees. The benefits are to die for." I declined as politely as I could, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. He laughed again as he got out, tossing a handful of bills onto the seat. "Your loss," he said, "but if you change your mind, you know where to find me. We're always open." I drove away as fast as I could, the money he'd left behind feeling cold and somehow damp in my pocket. When I finally worked up the courage to count it later, I found it was exactly double my usual fare. Not a penny more or less. These encounters, and countless others like them, have become my life. Each night I get behind the wheel, I wonder if this will be the one. Will this be the fare that finally drags me back to that house, to the thing with the shifting face and the hungry smile? But I can't stop. The city won't let me. It's like I'm caught in a web, each strange passenger another strand binding me tighter. And always, that song plays in the back of my mind. A constant reminder of what waits for me in the shadows of this city. So I drive on, through the nights and the nightmares. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. We keep moving, keep living, even when we know that sooner or later, the meter will run out for all of us. And when it does, I just hope I'm ready for where my final fare takes me. It was a night like any other, or so I thought. The city was shrouded in a thick fog, the kind that muffles sounds and makes the familiar seem alien. I'd been driving for hours, the streets unusually quiet. No fares, no calls, just the endless maze of New York stretching out before me. As the clock on my dashboard ticked past midnight, I found myself in a part of town I didn't recognize. The buildings loomed impossibly tall, their tops lost in the mist. Street signs bore names I'd never seen before, in languages that hurt my eyes to look at. That's when I saw her. She was standing on the corner, her form flickering like a bad TV signal. One moment she was the young woman I'd picked up all those years ago, the next the businessman with bloody cuffs, then the old woman with her box. Faces I recognized from a decade and a half of nightmarish fares, all blending into one impossible being. I knew I should drive away. Floor it and never look back. But the song in my head, the one that had been my constant companion for 15 years, suddenly swelled to a deafening crescendo. My hands moved of their own accord, guiding the taxi to the curb. She opened the door and slid into the backseat, her form still shifting, never settling on one appearance for more than a moment. "Hello, Julius," she said, her voice a chorus of all the passengers who had haunted me. "It's time for your last fare." I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But I was paralyzed, my hands locked on the steering wheel. "Where to?" I heard myself ask, my voice distant and unfamiliar. She laughed, the sound echoing through the cab and seeming to distort reality itself. "Oh, Julius. You know where. You've always known." The taxi started moving, weaving through streets that twisted and changed with each turn. Buildings bent and warped around us, their architecture defying all logic. And all the while, that damn song played louder and louder, drowning out even the sound of my own frantic heartbeat. I don't know how long we drove. Time seemed to stretch and contract, minutes feeling like hours, hours like seconds. But eventually, inevitably, we arrived. The house stood before us, just as I remembered it. But now I could see it for what it truly was, not just a decrepit brownstone, but a cancer on the face of the city. A hungry maw, waiting to devour the unsuspecting. "We're here," the thing in my backseat whispered, its breath cold on my neck. I turned to look at it, to finally face the terror that had been haunting me for 15 years. But the backseat was empty. With trembling hands, I opened the door and stepped out. The street was silent, the fog pressing in around me. The house loomed before me, its door hanging open like an invitation. Or a threat. I knew I should run. Knew that stepping into that house meant the end of everything. But the song in my head had become unbearable, a siren call I couldn't resist. As I approached the porch, I saw movement in the windows. Faces pressed against the glass. All my fares, all the lost souls I'd ferried over the years. They watched me with hollow eyes, their mouths moving in silent screams. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking. This was it, the end of the line. But before I could turn it, I heard a horn blare behind me. I spun around to see a taxi, my taxi, idling at the curb. The driver's side door was open, and behind the wheel sat me. It was me as I had been 15 years ago, young and hopeful, unaware of the horrors that awaited. I looked at me with a mixture of pity and determination. "Get in," he called. "This isn't where your journey ends." I hesitated, torn between the nightmarish familiarity of the house and the impossible promise of escape. The song in my head reached a fever pitch, urging me to step through that doorway. But in that moment, I realized something. The song, the house, the thing with the shifting face, they only had power because I gave it to them. Because I kept coming back, kept picking up fares, kept feeding the hungry heart of the city. With a final look at the house and all the lost souls trapped within, I made my choice. I ran to the taxi, practically diving into the passenger seat. My younger self grinned at me, a familiar gleam in his eye. "Ready for one last ride?" I nodded, unable to speak. He threw the taxi into gear and we peeled away from the curb. As we drove, the fog began to lift. The twisted, impossible streets straightened out, becoming the New York I knew and loved. "Where are we going?" I finally managed to ask. My younger self shrugged. "Anywhere but here. Sometimes the only way to win is to change the game." As we crossed the bridge out of Manhattan, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The song in my head, my constant companion for 15 years, finally faded away. I don't know what awaits me beyond the city limits. I don't know if I'll ever truly escape the horrors I've seen, the passengers I've carried. But for the first time in 15 years, I'm not afraid to find out. Because sometimes, the most important journey is the one that takes you away from where you've been. As the city skyline receded in the rearview mirror, I closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. Whatever came next, I was finally free of the yellow cage that had held me for so long. And somewhere in the distance, I swear I could hear the sound of a meter clicking to a stop.